Throughout the last several decades, society has rapidly evolved. Society has seen numerous examples of great change in teen pop culture, science, and technology, and especially the entertainment industry. But have these changes been for the better, or have they been for the worse? Some believe that these changes have been for the better. For others, not so much. But the real question remains, have these changes been for the better, or have they been for the worse? To answer this question, we've interviewed a select group of students and staff at South Windsor High School to obtain their perspective on this analysis.
A normal day for me would probably be wake up and go to school. Then on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I go to work from 3 to 8:30.
I go to school and then I go right to tennis practice, and then I come home, eat dinner, shower, and do my homework for pretty much the rest of the night.
I am very active with extracurriculars, especially with music at my school, so a lot of my day-to-day life consists of whatever I'm staying after for music that day.
I go to school, obviously, and then after school I've usually got like chores or running errands for my mom, and then I go to work. Then I come home and do homework and more chores.
School would last for about 8 hours or so. After that, I do stay after a lot. I'm in a lot of clubs.
I don't really do much. I just do my work, go home, have fun, watch TV, Seinfeld, comedy, or go on the computer, play PS4 and play Skyrim.
Other than school, I'd have to say a lot of video gaming and napping.
I have a very hard time balancing social life and school and jobs just because it's all just a lot of pressure. It's just busy running around all day.
I procrastinate a lot when it comes to schoolwork, but I still manage to get it done. Usually that takes a couple late nights during the week, but I still manage to balance that.
I have 2 jobs and I have school, so just between that there's like no time left. I work Fridays and Saturdays.
There's a lot of projects or homework or tests going on. It's pretty hard to fit in the extracurricular activities that I do.
Sometimes if I play video games a little too late, then it's hard to balance getting homework done and waking up on time to get into school.
Technology has definitely helped me succeed because it helps with my social life. I don't have to write a letter or see someone in person. I could just send them a text or call them.
I can waste a lot of time on that and procrastinate, but it's also helped me because I'm able to organize my life better, email people, communicate more efficiently.
On one hand, like technology can make things a lot easier, but on another hand, it can also make things harder. Like, gotta turn in your essay by midnight. It's no longer due by class. Like, can't just like quickly write it right before class. Gotta give it by midnight.
I would say technology has been very helpful, especially computers, your phone, do aid a lot in school-wise too, especially getting things done.
It does help because it's a technological advantage that they usually are for the better. But then again, there's always a downside to things, like people getting stuck on their phones rather than doing what they should do.
I think in some cases technology has hindered my ability to be motivated to do work enough, but it also has helped me get work in on time, because if I forget an assignment, I have Google Docs on my phone.
It has absolutely helped me succeed. I am very much interested in technology. Talking about technology as a hindrance, I think that pertains to a lot of people of the older generation. Oh, all these newfangled gadgets, we don't need that. I want to go live on a farm somewhere. And technology has very much been a positive influence on my life.
The teenage began as early as the 1950s. It was a time of rebellious pop culture, influenced by figures like Elvis Presley, James Dean, and Marlon Brando. Films like Rebel Without a Cause and On the Waterfront.
I could have had class. I could have been a contender.
It was also a time of great political tension in the rise of the Cold War. The 1960s was a time of rebellious increase in young adult life. Music produced by artists like the Beatles and Pink Floyd were the highlights of the decade in the midst of tragic events like the Kennedy assassination and the start of the Vietnam War. It was also the beginning of the progressive and social justice era.
I look back to the 60s, late 60s, early 70s when I was in high school, And the first thing I think about is the technology today versus absolutely none then. I mean, there wasn't much technology around. We had no computers. Computers didn't come in until, the late 80s. And, cell phones and things like that were more the 90s. But so we had to find other things to do.
We didn't have locks on doors, okay? There was no real drug, deterrence. Our parents weren't as educated, okay? So I lived at a time where there was a lot of racial divide. I also lived through the desegregation time too, when they decided to, okay, now we're going to mix black schools and white schools together. So I have to say I had a very turbulent 60s. I'm surprised I'm still standing here. We weren't aware of it. We didn't know the dangers that we were in. We also had a much lower drinking age.
Very few students drove cars to school. In fact, they didn't allow students to drive to school. This is back in the, like I said, late 60s and 70s.
In the 1970s, teen culture was influenced by a new wave of artists, like the Bee Gees and a young John Travolta. Films such as Saturday Night Fever, Jaws, and Star Wars brought a new aesthetic to the entertainment industry. It was also the time of Woodstock, the hippie generation, and rebellious protests against the Vietnam War.
As far as your school day, I went to classes just like I would say current generation does and all that. We didn't have as many after-school activities. We had sports. Many kids worked after school, okay? Even if you played sports, you'd find some way of, getting a part-time job. So that, I think that was more common, especially 60s, 70s, and even maybe into the 80s.
The 1980s was an era of hope and unity as artists like Journey, Michael Jackson, Aha, and various others expressed their talents throughout the nation and around the globe. Figures such as President Ronald Reagan ended the country's political tension, ending the Cold War and taking down the Berlin Wall. Devices like the Sony Walkman became a huge fad.
Yeah, normal day when I was a teen, it was interesting because I always go back, the first thing you did when you came home from school was like change out of your school clothes. Those days are gone.
Like when I was in elementary school, you had school clothes and play clothes, and you got home from school and you changed into your play clothes. In high school, you didn't play as much, but that sort of changed. You would go about your day pretty much in your high school clothes. So you go to school, you do your classes and all of that. I was involved in some after-school activities. We would do those.
I came of age in the early 80s, and my mother went back to work. So up until that point, it was fairly common for mother to be home, but that put the emphasis on me. I had to get a job. Most kids my age got jobs. I don't think the participation in sports at my school was as great with clubs and all that because you kind of had to work. I mean, it wasn't like just because you were a teenager, you weren't getting a car and you weren't getting your license unless you had, in my town, in my family, it was very common, even among my friends, like you had to work. So we all worked jobs. Definitely it was one of those you work from 4 to 8, something like that, and homework kind of took place somewhere, maybe not as much as it should have, but yeah, and then you picked a sport. I mean, we had some 3-sport athletes, but you generally picked, like, I play this because I have to work during these seasons. And that was fairly common.
So I went to a very, very small high school. Because it was so small, as an athlete, you almost were required to play 3 sports. So very easily, you got up in the morning. I almost never ate anything before school. I did the school day. I usually was able to come home for half an hour, 45 minutes, and then went back to school and was in athletic events or competition pretty much until it got dark. Go home, eat, do some homework, watch a little TV, and start over. I don't think that there was as much pressure on us. I just don't. Yes, your parents may have wanted you to work to pay for things, or maybe you liked the idea of being part of a team or a business or an opportunity like that, but there was never anywhere near the social pressures that you face with technology, the Instagram, Snapchat, texting. That was removed.
I mean, it was a little simpler time. I mean, we didn't have to do the academic rigor that you guys have. I mean, we could ride our bikes without wearing a helmet. I mean, it was not that big a deal, but everything today is, very regimented and structured and whatnot, and the expectations are so much higher. So I felt like we had a little more freedom. You know, I mean, we would get on a bike and, you know, be home for dinner, and nobody really cared where you went or what you did.
When you left the house, your parents couldn't immediately contact you the way that they did today. So you were not under the same pressure that you are today to be in a certain place, to do a certain thing, to have things come out as an outcome. And I think that's one of the major changes of society.
I think we were a lot less busy, but we were also a lot less informed than today's generation. I think kids today have access to a lot more information and are a lot more sort of involved in current events.
We valued things more than today's generation. I think we had more of an attention span for things too. And I see today's generation, like, nothing really excites them because they've seen so much through YouTube videos and you know, they just have such easy access to everything that nothing seems all that valuable to them.
I grew up during the grunge era, so it was all about like flannel and big pants and work boots and not looking girly and Nirvana and all of this, you know, grunge movement. I actually think it was a kind of cool movement to grow up in because it was very anti-commercial.
I was definitely into Dave Matthews Band, Tori Amos, also into No Doubt. Like in the 90s, that's when No Doubt like came out.
The beginning of rap music, the idea of NWA, Public Enemy coming out of California, music coming out of New York.
There are people who listen to it for the music, but the lyrics were big. I think that it may not have had the influence that it has today. Lyrics back then, I'm that old guy now, but you know, artists will talk about when they would write songs, you know, you couldn't say half of what they say today. So you had to be very, you know, suggestive, or the connotations there. But, you know, as growing up, I mean, there were some things that interested you. I mean, you were into protest music, not as much, because the times, for me in the 80s, it wasn't that big a deal. But, you know, when you look back at what happened in the 60s and 70s, you know, that stuff was kind of cool to listen to. Today, with what's going on, I would imagine it has a bigger influence because particularly, like, all the protest songs that have gone on, Black Lives Matter, hip-hop is huge. I mean, they're really kind of doing some social justice there. It's just a matter of the times that the lyrics are written in. I wish they'd cut out a little bit of swearing today because that kind of dilutes the message, if you ask me. Yeah, it had an impact, no doubt about it. It was a reflection of our time, you know.
I'm maybe in the minority in this, but I don't think there's that much difference. I think for the most part, young people are young people. They just manifest their youth within the culture of their times. And I don't think that when I was, you know, 15, 16, 17, I was that much different than most 15, 16, 17-year-olds. We don't like to be told what to do. We thought our world revolved around our friends and social life and everything. And we took comfort knowing that the safety that the adults provided without saying that they provided it. I don't think there's that much difference between now and then, and I think that's always been the case.
We had the same concerns, you know. We valued our social life, concerns about academics, same drama that existed. So there's a lot in common.
If I were to advise the current, which I do pretty much every day, they're probably tired of hearing about it, but and then certainly future generations, I think a lot of that has to do with, you have to go with what works. I mean, the people who came before you are in the positions they're in for a reason. And, you know, it's very typical for a teen to kind of be like, you know, anti-authority or whatever. You know, what do you know? Well, they've been there. And I think they made the right choices and they did the right things. And I think that, you know, you really got to look at the people who came before you because they can tell you how to get there. And all you got to do is look around at the people and say, you know, they're where they need to be. Clearly that person is not. And it's just a simple thing. You can learn so much from looking at what others didn't do.
I think that my advice would be to create a support network for yourself, people that you can talk to that are at different age levels that you can go to for support, that you can go to if you have questions or concerns about things. Don't try to go things alone. Create a system by which there is a outlet for frustrations or struggles that you're having and allowing people to help you work through things I also think that the adage of don't trust anybody over 30 still actually applies, that you want a support network that you think is going to be beneficial, but not one that's going to interfere with what you want to do and what your goals are.
You know, now kids are living at home until they're 25, 30 years old. You know, it's not appropriate, you know? So you got to work hard and you got to prepare yourself, because the workplace is competitive, you know? There's less jobs available out there now, and there's more people going for them. So you got to work hard and you got to prepare yourself.
You didn't realize where technology was going, and now it's just insane. Like, you know, I laugh at kids because they're like, well, what do you mean I can't use my cell phone? I'm like, I went to school in the 90s, I couldn't have a Walkman, so stop complaining. You got a Chromebook now, they have Chromebooks. We never had that, never had that. You had one computer lab in the whole school. Stay up to date with your technology, because it keeps changing. Don't worry about what people think about you, because you will find that you are your own individual person and you will love yourself for that. And the people who you think have perfect lives, 99% of the time, they don't have perfect lives. They actually probably have the complete opposite of that.
To be successful, you know, you have to realize that there are limits to what you can and can't do. There are still rules on the planet. And I think no matter how you try as human, future high school students are going to set the course of, I think, humanity on this planet. They're going to have to refocus themselves back to getting good at one thing, and we're going to have to answer some serious questions on what is the law. I think we're past that right now, and I think that's the problem we have. We have too many people making their own rules up. And if we're going to survive as a species on this planet, I mean, the youth, the next generations to come are going to have to deal with these things.
Put your phones down. I try not to criticize, because I know that the current generation and future generations, it's not their fault. You grew up with it. But I think you're missing out on a lot of life. I worry about the future generation's communication skills. I worry about their ability to be alone. I worry about their ability to find interest in things without looking at a screen.
My advice and my hope is that the current generation will figure out how to navigate our sort of overwhelming media environment better than we are doing it right now. I'm hoping that growing up with the media that you have today, you'll be more prepared to kind of tackle the issues and problems involved.
Try hard. It's supposed to be hard. That's where things have changed.
It's different today. Yeah, it is, but the core values are always there. You know, if you work hard, if you ask questions, if you listen, and there's always somebody as a team that you look up to and say, yeah, they did it the right way.
Follow your dreams, no matter what the older generation says about you. You're not that much different than they were. You know, it'll all be fine. Just, you know, get your education, and you know, it'll all be good.